Welcome to Word Alive with Fidelia. Thank you for tuning in. My talk today is titled, What is in Your Hands? What is in your hands? Sometimes we kind of underestimate what we have and who we are. We think we are not enough, we cannot do certain things. We limit ourselves so much that it can affect our life's progress and even our faith in God as well. The Bible declares in the beginning that God made the whole world out of nothing. He uses the weak things of this world to shame the wise. In Exodus 4, when God called Moses and saddled him with the assignment to lead the Israelites from the hands of Pharaoh in Egypt, Moses looked at his inadequacies. Is Tamara to go stand before King Pharaoh? He said. He asked God, what if they did not believe or listen to him? But God told Moses, what is that in your hand? He answered, just a rod. But he later realized that it was not just a rod, as the same rod he threw to the ground turned into a snake. He stretched it to the rock, and water came forth. He pointed it to the Red Sea, and it parted to allow the Israelites walk on dry land. He did the same for the water to cover up their enemies who ran after them. So, in the end, Moses saw that it was not just an ordinary rod, but a rod full of power and authority in his hands. Even as a stammerer, he was courageous to stand and speak with Pharaoh, and he eventually led the Israelites out of the land of Egypt. We also saw in 2 Kings 4:1-7 was the story of the widow with the jars of oil, whose creditor were going to take her 2 boys as slaves in repayment for the debt owed by her late husband. So she cried out to Elisha for help. Elisha replied to her, how can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house? Here her response. Your servant has nothing there at all, she said, except a small jar of olive oil, something not to be reckoned with. But having followed Elisha's instructions, that same nothing to reckon with jar became jars of oil that overflowed so much that she did not only pay off her creditors, but had enough for her sons and her family for a long time. Joseph's life was not over, even though he was thrown into the pit. God sold to an Ishmaelite, then to Potiphar, an Egyptian, who was one of Pharaoh's officials. From there to serve in the king's palace, but later thrown in the prison because of the lies from the king's wife. But through his talent of dream interpretation and God's favor and protection, he was promoted to the palace and became an important person. He was successful in the land of his suffering and redeemed his family and the entire land of Egypt during the famine. So every single one of God's chosen leaders, they were not perfect people. They were broken, sinful people just like us. But God magnified their inherent talents that He has bestowed upon them to do great things. So do not look at yourself, at your imperfections, as an excuse for not serving or doing great things. Look at these people of God that He used mightily for His kingdom. Abraham was too old and no child, yet became the father of great nations. Jacob was a liar, trickster, a deceiver who took advantage of his brother Esau, of his weakness. But God still blessed him. David was an adulterer and a murderer, and even ensured the woman's husband was killed at war. Yet, David was a man after God's heart. 1 Peter 4:10-11 says, each of you has been blessed with one of God's many wonderful gifts to be used in the service of God and others. So use your gifts well. Do you have the gift of teaching God's message? The gift of helping others? Wisdom? Knowledge? The gift of faith to also encourage others? Healing hands? Reconciliation? Compassion? Speaking in tongues? Gift of prayer? So many more gifts God has bestowed upon us through the Holy Spirit. Use them wisely and in the strength and ability that God has given. Our amazing God, He has a nature of calling and using people who had nothing or not qualified to bring His word and works alive, making them mightier than they were when He calls them. And this is to give Him all the glory and praise. So, not how much you have, but how willing are you to go with Him? When He calls us from our weaknesses, from our limitations and a place of nothingness, He equips us with all that we need to accomplish the task and bring us to perfection. We all have something to give, and there is power in our hands and in our beings. So, do not say I'm not holy enough or don't have what it takes to serve God and our fellow brothers and sisters. In Matthew 14:17-21, remember how Jesus fed about 5,000 men, beside women and children, with only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. All ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 baskets full of broken pieces that were left over. Amazing. So our God is a God of multiplication. That's why we should not be afraid to give Him everything, whether our tithe, our offerings, or of ourselves in service. Why? Because to do so is so much gain. Let us not be selfish, nor be ignorant of the powers in our hands, just as we have in our tongues. We have the power and abilities in our hands, and we can do all things through Jesus Christ who strengthens us. Quit limiting yourself or what you have. People say I'm just an ordinary. No. We are made in the image and likeness of God, and we are special people. In the words of Nelson Mandela, he says, it is in your hands to create a better world for all who live in it, and in your hands to make a difference. So, brothers and sisters, my prayer today is that the Holy Spirit would grant us the willingness, the strength, the courage, and the discernment to recognize what we have and make good things happen out of it. And in doing so, I trust and I know that God will magnify it for us and for His glory and honor. Thank you so much for listening. Have a blessed week.